recording this so that we'll be able to link this to our new school consolidation webpage on our site. What I want to talk with you tonight is about the process that we'll use and the data that you need. And we really do need your input here. So I'm going to outline a process that gives you something to look at, and if you decide you want to alter that process at all, you just need to let us know, and then I'll share with you data that we think would be helpful to you. You might say, no, we don't need all of that, or you may say, yes, we need that and more. So I do have folks here recording and taking notes so that if you do have requests for other pieces of information, we'll be able to get that to you. So let's start with process first. So we're here, it's August 22nd, obviously, and what we're outlining here and is the process that we might use for you to begin your deliberations about whether or not to consolidate our schools. Just a reminder for the community that might be watching that we did have the joint council meeting last week, did the tour of the middle school, and that now is the time for the school board to determine whether or not you will consolidate schools. Your first decision isn't about what schools to consolidate, it's is that something that should be done? If the answer is yes, then the second part of your process would be to make a decision as to how that would be done. And those folks that watched the presentation I did at the joint meeting know that we're really looking at this because we've lost, as of last school year, 522 students since 2006. We've lost incredible amounts of state funding since 2008, and we just don't see that funding coming back to you. A great example is the first year the support staff cap was put in place, and that cost us almost $1 million in cuts. That's $1 million that we're just never going to see coming back into our budget. So this is a way for the board to determine, might it be the right decision to consolidate schools to free up funding that could then be put back and reinvested into the school division for other ways. So that's just a short capsule, but I do encourage folks to look at the presentation that was done at the joint council meeting, of which you all were in attendance of. So if tonight is about deciding on is this the right process, and then also what data initially you want, but clearly there'll be plenty of time to ask for additional data. So the thinking would be then at our September 19th meeting, which we would televise the regular meeting and the work session, which would keep us in here, that I would at the regular meeting do a summary of what we did tonight on camera as part of my comments, so in case somebody tunes us out and doesn't go to part 2 of the meeting, and then during that September 19th meeting at the work session is provide you all the data that at that point we know that you would like to have for your deliberation purposes. The other thing here is you may at any point between now or after our meeting in September say, I want to meet with you, Jennifer, superintendent, I've got some questions, or I might want to ask for some additional data, or also to meet with our board chair or us together. So the point being is we're not confined to just talking only at meetings, that if there's other information you need or you have questions, certainly we're available to help you in any way that we can. So then October 17th, again, with both meetings being televised, and because they're televised and recorded, we'd also then link it to our websites so that people, if they missed the television that evening, could see it, and we can also run it again on our TV channel, is then providing you a summary of information from the September work session. I would talk about that briefly during the regular meeting, and then at the work session, I would suspect that after the September 19th meeting, you might have additional questions or information requests, so we bring the additional information to you at the October 17th work session. So because usually once you start a discussion, you think of something else that you might need information related to it. And when we've had in past years things such as this, it does sometimes take multiple meetings to get all that information to you. As you know, at the joint meeting, there was discussion of you potentially coming to a final decision in November about whether or not to consolidate. Again, not which, if you vote to consolidate, not which schools, just whether or not you wish to consolidate. So that could possibly happen at the regular meeting in November. It might be you say, hey, we need a work session beforehand just to talk about a couple things before we vote. Or you might determine that you're not ready to do it in November, and then we would push the process out. So this just sort of outlines where you could be for the next few months, but please recognize this could change as you move through the process. So My question to you is, are you comfortable with this process at this point, knowing clearly it could change?
I'm very comfortable with the process. My concern is November 21st is the week of Thanksgiving, and that's our normal third Tuesday of the month. But, I mean, I know I have plans to travel, I'm just.
Okay, all right, so we'll take a look at that. We could call a special meeting if we need to, too, and to, if we want to keep to the November timeline. So we'll definitely take a look at that. It's a good point.
Did I hear you say that in November, we plan to make a decision about whether or not to consolidate only?
Yeah, yes, that's what you'd be aiming for, is to decide whether or not to consolidate schools in November, but not make the decision which schools you might consolidate, or you might determine that you don't want to consolidate, and then that stops the discussion right there, and then we would move forward with other discussions. But yes, by November, do we want to consolidate schools or not? Because if you make the decision that you want to consolidate schools, we're going to have to do more research and get more information, I think, about capital costs and the like, to determine how might you do that consolidation.
May have been napping during the last meeting, but didn't the city council put us on notice to get this decision made entirely this year?
That was my understanding.
Yeah, there was some discussion about getting that done by December. I don't know that you'll be able to hold to that, I'll be honest with you, because this is a lot to tackle. It might be that you decide in November that, yes, you're going to consolidate, and you think in December you'll be ready to know which school, because you'll have some information. I'm sure there'll be understanding if you don't make the end of the deadline for, if you decide to consolidate, which school to consolidate by that December mark. But I think you're going to have to move through this process and see, I just don't want to move you so quickly that you're not getting what you need to make a thorough decision. Does that make sense?
Sure, process sounds good. I just thought we were on a tighter timeline than this.
And I will keep, I actually sent this presentation to Randy Wheeler, the city manager, so he has this, and we'll talk to him tomorrow after getting feedback from you. So he'll be updating city council on this as well. As you all recognized at the joint meeting, we have such a great relationship between city staff and school staff and you and city council that, they'll be very much in tune with what's going on, and will understand, your timeline as you move through it, I would say.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions about process? Are you comfortable with this at this point? We'll certainly look at the November date. No, things could change. Okay.
I have one comment, and I'm really comfortable with this process, and we've had some conversations, and I've had a couple of conversations with board members, that we've done our very best to make this as public as possible. The presentations being taped and all that, so I think that will help us in the process, because if we went into a work session and didn't, folks didn't have the ability to come in or didn't see it, I think that possibly delay as we might have some communication from the community. I'm really comfortable with how open this process is, and I think the public will be very happy, the ability to see what we're talking about and have it taped and replayed and all those things that we really want to make sure that continues as we go forward, being open.
I'm a little concerned with these one-on-one meetings, as they are one-on-one and the information wouldn't be put out there. Perhaps, I haven't seen it, but maybe on the school consolidation website, there could be an FAQ area where questions that the school board has had, maybe that we have sent in to you, or that if we've met with you, they could be placed there.
Yeah, and I would say that if you're having meetings with me or you're talking to Chairman Cast, much like I do when I update you, per a board member's question, here is this, so we would definitely be putting that information out, and it could certainly then also be placed on our webpage that would be there. So I don't want you to think, we're not, we are being very transparent. You're going to see I have a communication plan that's going to come along in the next couple of slides. What we just wanted to make sure is, as you always are welcome to call me about anything, you're welcome to call me about this as well, or Chairman Cass too, and if you talk to him, I'm sure he'll relay any information to you. So I also want the community to know that in reality that does happen. You'll sometimes call me with a question during in between meetings, and then I'll get that information out to you. So yeah, I want to make sure it's very open.
Yes, and I want to say that idea was my idea, because I feel like if we're being open and tonight we're begging people to give input, that each one of us is going to get a lot of communication, and we're not always able to share that communication to the folks who might need to hear some of that. So I wanted us to have the ability to have meetings, if you want, Dr. Parrish or with me, so that you can say and get out, and if 150 people called you, you can report on what those 150 people said if you want to go one by one. We would have 6-hour work session meetings if we went around and allowed everybody to give the input that they've heard from the community. So that was me pushing. It's not an attempt to hide anything. It's actually an attempt to bring to light publicly everything that we're hearing out there. So that was me.
And to follow up, then that way we could summarize, if you're able to share some input that you've gotten ahead of time, that could be part of the information that we actually share during the course of the work session, because we've gotten it from you ahead of time. And if, we've heard the same thing from multiple people across multiple board members, we can get that out to you too.
I'm not sure if this is the right meeting for this question, but along this path, because I think it won't be as clean as we want. So clearly, I think the mayor made it very, very clear that we have to make a decision, this board, about whether or not to consolidate based on the data we have right here. But the money matters. So along the way, we have a give and take with kind of how the money's looking for the city, because if we say, yes, we have to consolidate, and they say, no money, not going to happen, we wasted our fall. So is there a give and take as we go and as we're talking between you and Randy, I guess?
Well, I know that Randy and Mayor Hunt talked at the joint meeting that they are going to run some of their financing to get a better handle on debt service, to get a sense of, what their ceiling might be on that. So we'll get that information from them. Again, I work so closely with the city manager. We talk regularly that I think we'll be, I'll be able to get. So if you have a specific question that we need some data from the city, then we'll be able to get, as long as they can get it, we can get it to you.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So here is just a start for you of some pieces of data that I think would be helpful to you. If you disagree, please tell me. And this is where I'm looking to see if you think of other pieces of data you might want. And you may not think of that tonight, and I'll give you a copy of this presentation to you before you leave. But you might think of it later, and then you just need to let me know, and we'll add it to the list. Just know that if you get a request for data 2 days before the next board meeting, I might, depending on what it is, I might not be able to get that in front of you September 19th. Especially because we have a shorter timeline, because this board meeting is a little bit later than it is because we're trying to get it closer to the start of school. So we're down to 3 weeks versus our usual month. But first of all, updated estimates of cost savings, both operational and capital. We didn't really provide any of that capital savings information in the presentation that you saw that we used with the consolidation committee, but we need to look at that. So in other words, if you take a building out of service and you don't have to, that means you don't have to replace the roof, what would that save us in capital dollars, which would also be up against then the debt service for the city. So to give you a sense of that, really, if you look at it, and again, your first decision isn't picking one of these options. It's, do you want to consolidate? But there really are, because we only have 4 schools. If you're going to consolidate, I believe there's only 2 real viable options here. One would to consolidate by taking PPS, the primary school, out of service and redistribute the grades between the elementary school, middle school, and possibly the high school. So in this scenario, the middle school remains in service, and as you've even seen tonight or talked tonight a little bit, would mean the middle school would require capital work, and we'd have to figure out then, as we go to shift students, would that be the only building that would need capital work or not? But that would be one option. And then the other one is the option that you could create a grade 3 through 7 or 3 through 8 school by doing an addition onto the elementary school. So that means you still have the primary school in play, and you would take the middle school out of the service. If you did 3 through 7, then you may move 8th graders to the high school. So these would be options for you to consider. But again, you're not deciding on these options, but what we would do to give you a sense of cost savings. So, what's the most we could save if we consolidated? What's likely the least we would save operationally with these estimates? It would give you a sense of that. So we gave the cost savings essentially for the first option what they were in 2012. You saw that at the joint meeting in that presentation, but what we need to do is now go back through them and redo them, because a lot has changed since 2012 in terms of costs, especially because we've obviously increased costs, and we have some mandates now that may impact some of those savings. So detailing some estimates of those cost savings, I think, will be helpful to you. Also, ways in which cost savings could be reinvested into the school division. Remember, Mayor Hunt did say that if you go to consolidate, what the city's looking at is then, the money that you're saving operationally, reinvesting into the school system. So where would you do that? How would you do that? I would think that would be data that would be important for you to know. What might we be able to do with that funding? And then programmatic advantages and disadvantages to consolidating schools. So by programmatic, I'm talking about, instructional programs and other actual programs that we run for our students. Are there advantages? Are there disadvantages? If there are, what are they? And then producing those for you. A history of school structure in Poquoson City Public Schools. As many of you know, and certainly our viewers know, we've had a number of school configurations within the city since the city had its first school. So when we had one school or two school or three schools, what was the configuration? So you get a sense of, what's the past in terms of the numbers of school Poquoson has had versus what we have currently. I think that's probably just good contextual information to have. And certainly when people have come to me to sort of give input on this topic, I do hear, well, when I went to school, we only had 3 schools and it was great. So I want you to have some of that contextual information. And then also information about school structure and other Virginia schools. There are a number of other smaller school divisions like us that have different school structures that may have 2 schools, 3 schools, or may have 4 schools. How are they structured? Just so you get a sense of what's happening elsewhere in the state. So I'm hopeful that this data would be helpful to you, but there may be some other data that you're interested in that you might be able to tell us now, or that you can just let me know, and we can get it to you at your September meeting, and if it cuts a little bit close to that, we'll certainly have it at your October meeting. So I sort of turn it to you. Would you say this data would be, all of that I've listed would be helpful to you?
I'd like to know how many positions would potentially be lost.
Yeah, that would be part of the cost savings, operational cost savings for the different options.
Dr. Pierce, do we have a gauge on where current enrollment is for not only this coming school year, but the...
We have
projected-
estimates from Weldon Cooper Center, so yes, that would definitely be, we'd provide that to you. So that's the best that we can do. I mean, they are the demographer for the state. As I said at the joint meeting, if the legacy is built, those folks have given us an estimate of students, so we'll have that too.
Is it safe to say that some of the data in the 2006 would lead us to believe that that was at the highest point of enrollment across our school system?
Yeah, from any data that we have that I've seen, it is the highest enrollment that the school division has had. So that's why we've marked our enrollment loss from that year.
There was an upturn predicted in 20? I can't recall the
Yeah,
year.
I think,
19 or 20?
or it might be 2021. I have to look back at the
I'm
presentation.
sorry, I don't know that. It'd
Yeah.
be good to know if there's any way to guess what happens after that, for the next 5 years
Yeah,
after that. I don't know
they'll
if it's
usually
possible.
track out for us 5 years. I can check to see if they can go past that in their estimates.
Good to know.
You did say that these 2 options at the top are not the only options you're presenting to us. Is that correct?
Well, where I say the only options that you have, the 2 schools that I think if you consolidate that you would likely take out of service would be the primary school or the middle school, because I don't envision you taking the elementary school out of service because it's new. The high school has capacity in it. It's not our oldest building, so I would envision you would keep that in play. So if you go to consolidate and you're going to actually take a school out of service, I'm envisioning it's going to be either the primary or the middle school. Certainly if other people have other ideas, but that's why these are 2 options for us to cost out for you. Not saying it's exactly what you would do, but to give you an estimate of the consolidation. But that's, by those options, I mean you're looking at either the primary or middle school in terms of what would be taken out of service, but your grade structure could be different from, as you shift kids through the elementary or middle and high, if you take the primary school out of service or the primary, elementary, and high school. Just keep in mind that in that capacity data that I gave to you in the last presentation, which you'll have in front of you again, so you don't have to go look at another presentation, that you're limited in some limited in schools as to how much capacity you have to move kids, which is the problem we face because we've got to do capital work to make this happen. We just aren't like a large division that has 10 elementary schools, closes one, so they put all their elementary students spread in between 9 schools. We just can't do that.
Dr. Parrish, can I ask a question? These two schools that, in two scenarios, the middle school and the primary school, they were the schools that were flooded during Isabel, correct? And if we had another Isabel, potentially would have water in both of those schools, correct?
Definitely, the middle school, I'm not 100% sure if the water actually got in the primary school. I need to get back to you on that.
Okay.
The elementary school, the former elementary school flooded, but the new one's been built since then, and even visually, you can see it's built so high that that should not be an issue, but yes.
Okay, and the other thing that I asked at the last meeting is if we could get the cost to
Yeah.
build the elementary school, and I know that some of that was covered in insurance, but I'd like to kind of know what the cost was and how much insurance covered what.
Yeah, I don't know about the insurance. I can tell you just to build the building at this point, what we're digging into is furnishings and any additional things that were done, but when we're looking at building the building itself, it looks like it was about 18.6 million. But we did purchase furnishings, you had that, we had some playground, we had some other stuff. So what we're working on is to give you a total cost of everything associated with that building. But I did want to give you a sense that we did go back and take a quick look at about the building itself.
But was there a meeting after the fact? I'm a project manager, and after big projects, we have like a project, not like a kickoff, but we kind of go over lessons learned. I know I've talked to some other people that were involved when the elementary school was built. I'd like to kind of know what lessons they learned so that if we do consolidate, we don't make those same mistakes kind of going forward. I didn't know if there was a kind of a meeting or a discussion after that project was completed to kind of go over lessons learned, but if there was, that'd be something I'd be interested.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, hard to say that there was a big formal meeting to talk about lesson learns. Part of the issue you have too is I started as the building was completed, so I don't have a lot of history for you. Did construction folks have conversations? Did we have some issues with the building? Yes. So do we have to go back and fix those issues? So that was certainly a lesson learned. Yes, I mean, clearly, if you decide to consolidate and then take on a construction project, whatever option you use, whether it's addition or build or whatever, certainly, not only from us, but as school divisions elsewhere do the same sorts of projects, please know we talk to one another too to get a sense of, how did that work for you, how that didn't, going to look at some buildings. So yes, there'd be the opportunity certainly to make sure we know all we can before we make that kind of a decision.
Dr. Parrish, I have instant angst about 8th graders in the high school. Would part of the programmatic advantages and disadvantages be discussing how interaction would be limited between an 8th grade class and a senior class?
I would say, I'll be honest with you, I don't see us getting that detailed in our discussions. That would be when you start to look at, okay, you're going to consolidate, how do you want to structure your grades, and therefore what capital work do you need to do? We would get that detailed in it. What we could talk about, though, are the advantages and disadvantages programmatically in general too. Are there advantages programmatically to having 8th graders at the high school? Are there disadvantages? So we would talk about that, but you would get into, if you're going to separate students, that would be that might be as you're looking at facilities too, how would you do that? So I don't see you getting into that level of detail for this first decision, but if you decide to consolidate and then are deciding which school to take out of service and therefore how to structure grades, certainly that would be part of that conversation.
Which would be kind of hard to do if we make a decision and then we're told what capital we have available, and then it ends up not working out the way that we want it to work out. Now we've made the decision to consolidate schools, but then we're stuck in one direction or another that we might not.
Yeah, I don't
be
envision
happy
you
with.
you shouldn't be stuck in one division or, in one way or another. You just shouldn't be especially because, as I said, the city's looking at their financing, so we get a sense of their debt service. I don't see you stuck in any way. I think you've just got to decide, does it make sense fiscally and to some degree programmatically to consolidate schools? If it does, then really dig in to say, okay, what will this look like for us? Because I think otherwise you'll make it so hard for yourselves to make the actual decision if the whole decision is focused on grade structure and which this building, that building, versus is it the right decision to do this? Yes, it is. Now, how do we make it so it is the absolute best for the students in our schools, which is what everything is that all of our decisions are based on. So, but again, if we start talking and give you information, you feel like you need information, we're going to bring it to you. If the process isn't working, we'll adjust there. What I just wanted to get in front of you today was, here's sort of a direction for us to move, data that I think would be valuable to you, so we'll start collecting it. We haven't started yet because I wanted to talk to you first and then get other information from you. So know that it is your decision, and we will continue to provide data, and if you say, wait, time out, we've got to decide differently, that's what you'll be able to do as a board. So you're not locked into this, but it's a starting point, and I think we're trying to give that to you so that then I think as you move through it, you'll get a sense of, do we need to decide about grade structure before we decide if we're going to consolidate as a board? If you think you need to make that decision, then that's what you'll do then. I just want to make it clear that there are options here, because I know that in the community, because of the consolidation committee's work, there was an automatic assumption you were going to take the primary school out of service. So what I want to make clear to folks is that decision has not been made. There are options, and you hear people talk about different ways they'd like to see grade structure, so there are options in doing that. You're not locked into just one thing here if you decide to consolidate. That would make it harder for you, I think, if it was like, this is it, this is your only choice. Any other questions about data? Any other pieces of data that you would like, that you can think of tonight, but I know you'll probably send some more to me.
I know there was a slide previously I believe it was at the joint meeting in regards to the capacity in terms of what the schools could take on in terms of additional students. If we were to, say, move an 8th graders to the high school, can we get that data again?
Yes, absolutely. All the data that we had in that presentation, I'll make sure you have right in front of you. Yeah. And we can actually run that data for you too, not by your September 19th. We typically run those enrollment numbers that we're basing loss on as of September 30th, but by your October meeting, then we'll have locked down what is our enrollment September 30th, how does it compare to past years, and that can also help with the latest update on capacity. Because the last time we had run the numbers was for budget, which is why I gave you a January capacity estimate. All right, so please, if you have other requests for data, just let me know, and we will work on getting that to you. So in September, when we come to you at the work session, we'll be providing you this data and potentially other things that you've mentioned tonight, because I've got folks who have written it down, and then anything else that we hear of, as long as we've got the time to gather it. If not, we'll definitely get it to you in October.
Dr. Pierce, before you go on, you mentioned something about it tonight, and of course, Ms. Rose mentioned it tonight, and I've had a couple of calls. You said that tonight that the state doesn't require you to do the air quality control testing.
Correct.
But you guys, can you, just for people that may be watching, can you tell us how often that's
Do
done?
that twice a year, and we do all different rooms and larger spaces as we do it. So it's not always the same room or the same space. It's we're careful to spread out what we do.
Can you tell us when the last time that was completed?
I cannot tell you the exact date, but I can get that to you.
All right, thank you.
And for those of you that may be watching, please know that question was as a result of somebody who spoke in the public comment who was asking some questions about the middle school because she saw information about the tour of the middle school in the newspaper. Okay, so here I said to talk to you a little about communication information. So you know that we had the 2012 School Consolidation Committee. So I have reached out to those folks because you have these people that did that research. These folks still have children in your schools, or children have maybe moved through grades, still some employees in the school division, many of the same connections they had when they were put initially on the committee. And so what they have indicated is they will serve as a resource to you. So it is a group of people that we can get input from. I know because we put their names on the screen when we did the joint meeting presentation. And we have that information on our webpage. So you essentially have the committee that did the work before that's still willing to be a resource to you. So if we have questions and we say, hey, we want to see what some different folks in the community, how they might react to this, we'll be able to access them. I can talk with them, get that information back to you. So I just wanted you to know that in essence, they're still there for us. And the good thing is they did that initial work. And so they bring that perspective, but they also bring the perspective of it now being 5 years later in the city, and they've moved, those that are parents have moved with us with their students. Those that are employees too have had different experiences, and just community members bring that experience to the table. So I just wanted you to know that I have been in touch and that we do have them as a continued resource. I mentioned Let's Talk, so clearly that's a great way for people to provide input, especially if they're not comfortable. Sometimes people aren't providing their names or their emails or their phone numbers. If they just want to send in something anonymous, it's a very easy way for them to do it. It is truly anonymous. We can't track back to see where it came from. But oftentimes when people use Let's Talk for different things, they will leave an email address or a phone number so we can reach back out to them. Even if they may not expect a response necessarily to an email, but just to respond, thank you, I appreciate you participating in the process. So any input we gather through Let's Talk, we'd obviously would get to you, board members as well. We do, as I said, have the school consolidation webpage up. Right now, we just have the joint council meeting on it. We'll get this video on it as well. And then as we gather information, we will get that out to folks so that they have access to it. And again, to encourage them to participate in the process as you move through it. So it's on the website right under announcements, so you can't miss it there when you look at our new webpage. It's also, if you go to the school board section, your section of the webpage, it's also listed there. So we've got it in different locations, and Let's Talk is right on the front page. It's also linked to other sections to schools, so there's very easy ways for people to get through to Let's Talk. Obviously, we'll continue to inform the media as we move through the process, and I know that they'll help to spread some of the information. We will use Twitter. We did that already as part of the push out for some of the stuff, so we'll continue to do that as well. So that wraps up my presentation for this evening. Is there any other information that you need from us that you can think of? And if you're okay, we'll move to the process in terms of September. If you need to change it after that, we'll change it. And like I said, I can definitely keep the city manager apprised to apprise council if that changes your time frame.
We think of something in between now and the September meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. Call me, email me. Be great.
I have one other question, and it was in regards to the consolidation committee. I'm just kind of make sure I understand that process. So did they present that, their findings to the board at that time, and the board voted at that time not to consolidate? Or did the committee find at that time that they recommended not to consolidate, and then that was it?
Yeah, the
until-
committee,
okay.
the committee worked during the course of the year, and then we created the report based on the committee work, and that was presented to the board members. So consolidation was never voted upon.
Okay.
Because once the consolidation committee said, look, with all of this information, exactly what I put out the last meeting, it just doesn't, it's just not the right time. And let's see, is that enrollment going to continue to drop? Because when they did in 2012, they were only 6 years out from 2006. So how much will it really get to that 567 number? And also because we are in the throes of the recession, that they're just trying to find capital money to do anything to be able to consolidate. There just wasn't hope to do that because the city had to so much try and help us through the operating budget crisis because we were losing so much money. So once the board received that report, they took no further action with it. So it's different from what you're experiencing now, because here it's actually now in your hands versus a committee doing findings and providing it to you. You as a board are actually going to make a decision. And one of the findings was wait till 2016 and then we've pushed it out to 2017 to get one more year of enrollment data for you. And also a little bit further past that recession where the city's actually able to look at some financing solutions if you do more. So a little bit different, but you do have this committee as a resource to provide input to you as you look for people to give you their thoughts. They're a group of people that have a little different experience than maybe some other people who weren't involved with that committee.
Well, I know that in that presentation of the joint committee, it had, I think, their proposal was to shut the primary school, and I think the savings was like $832,000. That was just make sure I understood that, that was just savings for operation for that school. What would be, if we sold that building or repurposed it something else, is there have been a cost associated, like per square footage, I understand what we're saving each year, but what would the cost of the building if they sold it? Or, you know what I'm trying to, I don't know if there's a rate they could find based on the square footage.
Yeah, there wasn't, we didn't look at, with that committee, because it's such an unknown whether you could sell that building to anybody or even lease it to anybody. So part of the cost savings wasn't about, well, we get X amount of dollars to sell the building or lease the building. It was, if we consolidated and closed the building, what are the operational savings, because we're not running a fourth building. So that's what those savings are. That's what we need to update. We know that, and we want to get that to you. I think it's just too hard to know if we could actually make any money off of a building. Also, we've had some conversations, I certainly know the city manager and I have, it may be, depending on what we do, that the city might be able to use part of, or some of the facility themselves for some activities. So in that way, it repurposes it for another reason. So does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Anybody else before we move?
I have some concerns only because I'm feeling rushed. I feel like, for so long, we've discussed other issues here in the city. We've discussed the condition of the middle school, and consolidation was kind of off to the side, and now I feel like it's just been thrust upon us here. And I don't like the feeling that, I just feel rushed. I'm wondering, is there another reason behind this suddenly coming to the forefront?
No, I don't think there's another reason. I think it's the sort of confluence of time of, sort of like the consolidation committee, wait till 2016, let's wait one more year. We're through the worst of the recession, so while we still made some cuts this year, our operating budget, it's a little bit easier now than it's been. We've been able to do some improvement to teacher compensation, so because we're not facing the kind of deep cuts that we were, where we're having to go to the city and say, please, give us even more money just to get our operating budget, you can have a conversation about debt service now, which you've got to connect to consolidation, because I want to make sure the community understands we can't do it without some kind of capital work. We needed to get to a place where we might be able to add to city debt service, which we might not have been able to do a couple years ago, and we didn't want to do that unless we knew that we really had this enrollment decline. So it's a combination of that enrollment decline, where we are financially, where the city is financially, so the time is right to have that conversation, and that's why you are. Now, if you decide as a board to slow this process down, that's certainly your prerogative. And again, we can have those conversations with the city manager. You all can have those conversations with council members. So certainly, it is your timeline. This was meant to outline it, to get it to what was discussed at the joint meeting, but it doesn't mean you can't change it. But I think that's why you are where you are. That enrollment, the financial status, the time has come for that discussion. And so here we are. If you need more time to make a decision, certainly that's understandable. You're welcome.
On this board feels the enormous responsibility to make the right decision for the city. And like Gail, I kind of am worried, but I'm trying to make sure that we share the information you're providing. Educated decision.
Yeah. I think that's a great statement. It is a big responsibility, and I think even Mr. Cass said at the meeting, it's probably one of the biggest decisions you'll make while you're on the board, if not the biggest. So, and that's why we're trying to get as much information out to encourage people to come and to communicate with us, in a clear manner as to what their thoughts might be on it. And, I'm sure I'll get a lot of input as I move through open houses. And this morning, I was in front of the Kiwanis group because they were recognizing our new teacher, so I took that opportunity to tell them about sort of the elevator speech version of it, and to let them know that the video is on our website, and the video of the joint meeting is also on the city website. So that was a big audience that I was able to communicate to. So we also have a lot of different ways of getting it out. So know that I personally will continue to try and do it in every way I can, because I am fortunate to have, access to larger groups sometimes. I will be mentioning this at convocation as well, as part of my convocation address. So everybody hears the same information there, all of our employees.
Gail's point also, it takes a long process to get from decision to whatever decision we make with consolidation, involves capital and everything else the city has to do with financing, to the bidding process. So this could be a couple of years process, maybe 2 or 3, to getting to the end result of what our decision was and all of that. So to me, it feels a little rushed at the beginning, but if we don't start now with the decision and be able to start all of those balls rolling, we could be 3, 4, 5 years down the road. So, and the weight of this since I came on the board, because one of my first meetings was talking about the findings of the committee. I've been thinking about this the entire time. We've had discussions with city council after we talked about the middle school and what we have to do to work on that, and I've been thinking about that, and that's millions of dollars. So I knew at some point we were going to be addressing this, and that's why I made the comment. We've been preparing for this, make this decision. It doesn't make it any easier, because this, as Jen said, is a huge, huge decision. And I was sort of hoping that my last year would be up before we had to. Happy to be in this situation that we can make a great decision for education and the impact they will have on not only Poquoson, but wherever they live. Thank you for articulating it a lot better than I did. Big decision.
Yeah, and I want to echo what Chairman Cass said. That is important to remember, and I'll be stressing this with employees too. But if you make a decision in the fall, you won't see any change in school structure or students shifting if you decide to consolidate years down the road, because there's all that other work, the next decision, and then the work to do it. So it's not like you're making a decision, even if, say, you push it to January, and then next year we're consolidating schools. It will be years apart to make all that happen, because we're a small school division. Great.
I'm going to say one more thing, and I'm going to shut up. And the city is a willing participant in this and very open to the financing and all of our discussions. And they want us to talk about this right now. So I almost feel we need to talk about this right now, because unless we all can figure out how to fund it without our city participating, we'll be in, in big trouble a couple of years down the line if the city is not in a position at that point. So when they said the time is right, I believe we need to address this situation now.
Yeah, and to get back to the money not coming back, every bit of money was cut for construction and maintenance from the state. So we have to turn to our locality. So that actually is, Gail, another piece of that pie, I think, is fortunately we continue to have a great partnership with our city. Not all can say that.
Great discussion.
All right, well, then we'll plan on televising our work session in September, bringing quite a bit of data to you, as well as some of the stuff from the that you already saw at the joint meeting, and we'll continue to update the consolidation webpage. Please let me know if you've got any questions or any other data you would like to see us provide. And if you are hearing input, feel free to share it, because you might get input that drives us to say, oh, we should get that data because of the input that you've gotten. So definitely stay connected as you hear it, as we will do with you as well. So. And I think you'll have more people engaged when the students come back. You still got people on vacation, and once we see all those students in open houses next week. So, great. Well, thank you all very much. That concludes our topics off the work session.
Thank you. It's 5 minutes till 8, and we're going to